the topic is one that I'm really excited about. It's something we've talked about doing for a while, and it's mostly my brilliant wife's brainchild. It's about creating a family culture, let's just say during and after a religious transition. So many parents worry that if they no longer remain Orthodox or even religious, that somehow they'll not be able to raise healthy, happy kids or have a healthy, happy family. And to some extent, I think many high demand religions really encourage that fear by telling people you can't raise happy, healthy kids outside the church. And, no one's perfect, but we feel like we know many, many families who are raising amazing kids, and our kids aren't perfect by any stretch, neither are we, but we feel like we've created for us a special and a meaningful family culture. And so today we're going to talk about that. And Margi's going to be the primary lead in today's discussion. Okay, so Margi, I gave a little bit of an introduction on this topic, but I'd love you to introduce it in your way. Why did you pick this topic for our audience specifically? What's the context sort of in a religious or Mormon transition, either to liberal Mormonism? Because we started all this way before we left the church.
I was going to say, the truth is, we have always I feel like we've always felt for this and kind of done this. So I feel like it is super important, and it also...
Why do people need it?
Well, here's the thing. You have it. You have it right now. So my view is, why not be mindful and aware of the culture that you're cultivating in your home? And so that's more of where it stemmed for me. I remember in Seattle feeling like, oh, maybe I feel a little differently here than things I'm hearing on Sunday. So here's a way for me to actually cultivate and empower messages in our home, or even emphasize messages from church too, that I just felt. So it's a great way to focus, and it's so empowering. It's just one of those things. I'm all about things that are very practical, but I'm also about things that make you feel empowered and fulfilled. And so that is true of what we're discussing here.
And just to echo some of the comments I shared at the very beginning, the church does a great job of filling your life up with culture, from family home evening to family prayer, to church attendance, to church activities, to church music, to, church talks. Like, you could literally, Mormon it up for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But when you sort of unplug, you sort of take the red pill and unplug from that Orthodox matrix, it can be really scary and disorienting. And I do think the church, like most high demand religions, prime you to be scared that you can't have a healthy family and a happy family without orthodoxy. And you can't have a healthy marriage, and you can't raise healthy kids without the church's Orthodox culture. And so what we want to just talk about is how to be mindful about that. And you're right, everyone's already doing it. And honestly, I think a lot of our listeners probably have rituals and values and traditions that we could all learn from. So before we even jump in, we're going to be talking about values and rituals and traditions that you could implement as a progressive or post-Mormon. And we want to start now by asking our listeners if they want to type in the comments some of their values or rituals or traditions. We'll share them as we go in the program.
And can I give just a quick disclaimer before we begin? So naturally, we're going to be sharing things from our home right today. And so I just wanted to be careful about, there are a couple reasons why I chose to do that. Clearly, it's what we know, and that's why it's a pretty natural thing. But also it makes it more interesting. I am practical, so I don't love discussing things at a high level without kind of bringing it down. And so that's another reason that I decided to go ahead and do that today. It is not because our family is perfect or because we think we're all that today and we'd just like to share it with you. That is not the reason why. It's more just for interest, and also to kind of bring it down in a practical way, hopefully in a way that's helpful.
Not only does perfection not exist, but striving for perfection is one of the main enemies of joy and happiness and well-being.
Look at you.
So we are not gurus, we are not role models, but
we're all on the journey
think
together.
Margi has been a master nurturer of a family culture that has really worked for us. So I think she's worth listening to.
Oh, thanks.
But
I really hope you feel the same way.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay.
Take it away, Margi.
So the first thing I wanted to do was just sort of think about a visual, and thinking about family culture as a tower. So we'll be laying out sort of these tiers, these levels of family culture, with the idea that as you build, that as you build, there is more power with all these things together than if you just focused on one, for example. So we will start with that sort of idea that the cumulative effect is greater than this sort of singular idea. So it begins, the foundation is values, of course. So the values are the foundational layer.
Okay, and we've talked about values before, but I want to make sure we define values, and it's even more tricky because we're defining family values. And I just will never forget growing up in Texas in the 80s, there was the Ralph Reed crowd with kind of the Christian Coalition who took that term family values and, in my opinion, really bastardized it or damaged it. If you were to ask me growing up, what do family values mean? I would have said, well, it means don't drink alcohol. It means don't take drugs. It means don't have premarital sex. Don't get an abortion. Don't watch our movies, and don't cheat on your spouse. And those are family values. In other words, sort of orthodox, conservative Christian don'ts are what we associate with family values. And I'm just going to take another moment to do what I've done before and define what the word values means. The word value literally means, what do you value? And so in the context of family values, it literally means, what does your family value? Now, your family can value health, good health, and in that sense, maybe for your family, moderate or no alcohol or drug use, that might be sort of a tactical decision you make in the spirit of living your value of health. And of course, other people may drink alcohol responsibly and also share the value of health. But the point is that the value is something like good health. It could be something like honesty. It could be something like kindness. It could be something like truth or education or learning. And our point, I think, at the beginning is that values do two really important things. They provide you with direction. If you want to go somewhere as a family, but you don't have a map, you don't know where to go. If you don't have your little, Google Maps, GPS device, you're going to just kind of wander around potentially, or you risk wandering around. So values provide you a direction. You list out your family values, you know what direction your family's going. The second thing that values can do is motivate you, because if you're ever down, if you're ever feeling lost or discouraged, you simply, as a family or as a couple, you pull out your list of values and you say, well, what do we stand for? How are we doing on these things that we value? What are some activities that we can do and start pursuing that will move us in a direction and that will get us going and get us unstuck? And so that's just an introduction to the idea of values. Another just final point to make is that values can grow and change. And so you may have a set of values in year 1 of your relationship or marriage or family, or in year 10. But over time, those values can be refined. And so there's nothing wrong with every month or every 6 months or every year doing a re-inventory of your values and taking away ones that you don't feel are necessary to note, maybe adding some others that mean a lot to you. Having your values grow and change is a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. Just also because let's say you have young children, maybe your values at that point will reflect that. And we're going to kind of take you through a few examples of what our values were at different times in our life. So I thought I would start in Seattle. In Seattle, our children were younger. Our oldest children were probably preschool to kind of middle grade school, I would say. So younger, I would say like 3 to, well, newborn to probably 7 or 8. And our values, I remember then John and I coming together and making out a list of values. And the values from that time were truth, beauty meaning like music, art, literature, plays, culture. So truth, beauty, love, excellence, and joy.
Truth, beauty, love, excellence, and joy.
And I remember I put those up on a bulletin board.
Were those part of our wedding vow?
They may have been.
Yeah.
They may have been. And so for that was kind of like a couple thing. I felt like it brought us closer together. It gave us an identity at that time. With the children, I would add, if you came into our home in Seattle, what you would see was nature. Like I took the kids out for walks probably every day, and creativity. There's a lot of just painting, drawing, creative play, Play-Doh. And so those would be the two things I think for the children that you would see a lot of as well. So that is the Seattle sort of young years. And then moved to Utah.
Yeah, as the kids started going to school, we always made them breakfast, and sometimes we drive them to school or take them to the bus stop or whatever. And I felt like I wanted to develop a little thing to say to them every time I said goodbye. I think that probably comes from my Mormon background, the whole return with honor or don't forget you who you are. But I wanted it to be something that wasn't sort of guilt-inducing and simplistic and honestly oversaturated with Mormonism probably. So I developed 5 words that I wanted to tell the kids every day before I dropped them off. And so if I was driving them a car, if I was walking with them, I would say, hey, have a good day and remember the 5 things. And I would say, these are the 5 things. I'd say, be kind, learn, work hard, have fun, and then I would say, be obedient. Now, what I meant by obedient is if you're going to school, don't break the rules of school because you can get in trouble. Over time, our kids told us they hated that value of be obedient. And I'm sure there's many post-Mormons or, liberal Mormons or questioning Mormons that agree that that's an awful value. So,
it worked for that time.
You can receive feedback and change as a parent. Over time in my time in psychology, I learned that flexibility was actually a key to positive mental health. And so I added that as a 6th value. But once the kids...
Which value did you add?
Being flexible.
Being flexible.
Yeah. Being psychologically flexible, open to what life brings instead of trying to control what life brings, because that's attachment, according to Buddhists, is suffering. So it got to the point where I would say that so much that I would stop saying it, and I would say, what are the 5 things, as I would drop them off for school. And so they would go, be kind, learn, have fun, work hard, and be obedient, and then be flexible. And it wasn't me telling them, but it was them telling me. And some may call that brainwashing, but I think it
was kind of focusing, actually, and playful.
Yeah. And one of the most, meaningful gifts that I received as a dad was this. So one of my daughters, I think it was a Father's Day or a birthday of mine, my daughter Maya put together a storybook called Remember the 5 Things. And she illustrated it. And in it, she told these little stories, about each of the 5 things. And there's
coming to play in her life.
So there's be kind. Situations. You can see someone being kind with someone who has a disability. Here's, work hard, and there's someone studying and working hard.
And it was kind of like she was faced with a predicament and then remembered the value, and then it kind of guided her. You should show them the little last page when she graduates. And
yeah, and in the last page, she draws herself graduating. I don't know how to make this look good. She draws herself graduating. What does that mean to you, the graduation picture?
Well, I just love that in the end she says, and she named the girl in the story Claire, but she said that for the rest of her life, Claire was a better person because of those 5 things. They helped her make a lot of important choices, all thanks to one person, Claire's dad. She made a difference in the world one step at a time, and her dad was proud. But what I loved about this was just, it's the idea that they have power. I mean, the things that you choose to focus on actually can make a difference. So, and I was going to say, I would probably say that was the focus from when our children were probably around the ages of 3 to 12. So preteen, I feel like that was a great kind of centering, ritual before the kids left for school. Now I did something a little bit different to kind of capture what our current culture would be. I texted my children.
Because values change over time, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we've made, amidst our transition and the excommunication, it has been less overt in our family life. So I was curious what our children would feel, what they feel our values are sort of in the past 6 years. Now our children now are 21, 19, 16, and 13. So I texted Anna, who's at college, still spends some time at home during breaks and things. I asked Anna what 5 values she feels in our home, what we emphasize or support and live on a daily basis. And they did not know what each other were writing. So that's interesting too, to see if anything, and this is kind of a great activity, can I say, if you want a starting point just to see, hey, what do our children feel like our family values are? You can do this. You can pull them aside, give them a sheet of paper and say, what do you feel from our family that our top 5 values would be? And it can be this really interesting sort of, I feel like, information gathering session for yourself. Anyway, Anna said education, tradition, communication, vulnerability, and connection. So that's what our oldest daughter said. Maya gave me 2. Maya, so our 19-year-old, said honesty and vulnerability. And then the 2 youngest that are actually living at home now, so Clara is 16, said honesty, education, kindness, health and nature, and communication. And then our youngest, Winston, said honesty, kindness, learning, have fun, and health. So what's interesting to me about that is the overlap. It does feel like some things overlapped. And anyway, it was just a great way to sort of get in touch with, are we living what we value?
And it's one thing to kind of tell your kids the values. It's another thing to have them reflect back what values they're just inherently experiencing in the home. So try that as parents. Try asking your kids, even if they're grown up, what values do you see in our family lived out, or what values do you remember being most emphasized growing up? And it can give you real sense of satisfaction or clarification or clarity to go through that experience.
Yeah.
So so let's see. There are lots of values that you could have. We've also considered other values in our family, like contribution. Obviously, our work with the Open Stories Foundation is sort of based on our value that not only do we just have a great life or try to live a great life, but also try and give back. So that's a value. And
our children have that in their lives too, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. We focus on responsible media use. I think if you guys saw our home, you would feel like we're very, I don't want to say controlling, but yeah, we're very conscious of screen time, of mobile device time, of TV time, of computer time, because we just think that, we should all live a balanced life. And we all struggle with that at times, but that is definitely a value. But I think the most important value that I see that came through here, we just really believe in emotional connection and emotional health. And, so, we talk a lot about vulnerability in our family and intimacy and emotional intimacy and connection. And this comes from our study of Shefali Sayberry and her work in a book called The Conscious Parent. But in the religious paradigm, the structure is control and coercion and consequences. And we've realized that if you deal with your kids from that standpoint, basically what can happen is you just teach them to lie, to resent you, to hide from you, and to do whatever they want just in secret. That if you really want, to have a constructive influence with your kids, it starts with emotional connection and intimacy, where you talk to them and you love them and you make them feel good and you make them feel comfortable with you, and you're vulnerable with them and you're open to their feedback, and you explain the principles behind the rules, and you get their input and you get their buy-in on rules and consequences and boundaries, etc. And it's difficult, it takes more time, and but it's something we've really valued. So
yeah, I was thinking another value I might add to the kids list would be growth, which I think is super important, coming from where we've come from, where perfection really was, I feel like, something that was the end goal, that it was expected, that because the idea is you will make mistakes. So let's talk about what you learned from it. Let's talk about what you do with what you experienced in a way that actually gives to you in your life. So growth would be another one.
Really quickly, Mike writes, one of our family values is discipline through love and uplifting words. Instead of no or stop, we just say no thank you. Mike writes, words matter so much. The saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is incorrect. Mike writes, words define us and shape our minds. So fill your kids' minds with the right words.
I really
Thank
love
you,
that, Mike. And, words oftentimes stick and stay. Oftentimes you can talk to adults that still can replay words from their childhood or things they were told. So such a good point.
Yeah, and if you want to share, if any of you have values that you want to share on the Facebook Live comment feed, or if you want to share it on the blog at mormonstories.org once we post this, or on YouTube, please go ahead and just share some of your values. That's a really positive thing.
Yeah, so to break it down a bit, I thought, how do you get started? How do you get started in a values discussion with your spouse, with your children, with your family? So if your children are old enough, one thing you can do is brainstorm. Get together and brainstorm. If they're really small, or if you think it would be helpful, you can actually print out a list of 15 or so, maybe 20, 25 values, and let them circle maybe their top 5 or list their top 5. And then you bring them all together and you put them in a master list, and then you kind of discuss as a family which ones feel the most important out of the cumulative, everyone's basic 5 that they kind of turn in. You choose from there, you vote, and then consider with what you vote, those final 5 or however many you choose values, find a way to display it somewhere so it can focus you and it can remind you all kind of around those values each day. You'll have a visual there.
And if you don't like New Year's resolutions because you find you violate them within 3 days of making them, what we did for many years was family values, where we would sit down and do a values inventory, and each child write down their own personal values that they wanted to live by. And so instead of like saying, I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to, win some race or get straight A's or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're just every day looking at, what are my values? It's learning, it's fitness, it's health, it's exercise, it's communication. That can be a really fun family exercise.
Really fun. And then they would write them on cards and decorate them. And I loved it because they were connecting with themselves in that activity. It came from them.
Lolly writes, empathy is a big one that I try to teach my little girl. Thanks, Lolly, for sharing another one of your values. If anybody else has a value they want to share, please do it. We'd love to hear.
Absolutely.
All right, what's next?
Second block.
All right, the second block is embodiment, and this is one that Margi listed. But I'm, yeah. And why don't you tell us what you mean by embodiment?
Yeah, what does embodiment mean? I think the idea is the living of the values, how people experience them in your presence, if they see them lived. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually
just practice what you preach. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. It's really actually living what you say. And I think your children really notice. They are looking to you to see, how are mom and dad experiencing the values? Are they aware on a new level? And they're looking for integrity there. And so embodiment, I think it's a great place to kind of start.
My dad, sometimes in moments of desperation, would say to us, "Do as I say, not as I do." And he was kidding. And that was an interesting and a fun thing that he would say to us. But the truth is, it's one thing to have values. It's another thing to live them. And it's another thing to live them in the heat of the moment when your kids can be, grouchy or disrespectful or just passions can be flaring. It's really important to model this stuff, because maybe one of the worst things you could do is really emphasize values as parents and then not live up to them. And what's hard about that is you don't want to get defeated and beaten down because you're not perfect, because we're not going to be perfect at living our values. Values are a direction. They're not a destination. And so with that, we're going to make mistakes. And then it's easy for a kid to just go, "Oh my gosh, you say our value is this or that," and then you don't live it. And then all of a sudden you feel beat down and discouraged. And so living it is actually quite challenging.
And as a parent, if you're having a connection discussion with your teen, let's say, over media use, right? But I'm on my phone all the time, or they're trying to talk to me and I'm texting or I'm distracted, it matters. They see that discrepancy, and it makes your conversation less potent, and our children actually will at different times give feedback around that, or say, and we need to be open to it and say, "You know what, I actually am a little bit, and it is addictive. I feel you." So, we're all on the same, we're like working toward it, but your strongest place is one where you're working to embody the values, and then also showing compassion for yourself and your children when it gets a little rough.
So one example of this is when, so we have a value of vulnerability and healthy communication and intimacy. But what happens when maybe one of the kids has done something we're upset about
or
don't like, or what if a kid's just rude or disrespectful? Again, how do you handle it? Well, if I sort of act instinctively, maybe I lose my temper, maybe I yell, or maybe I just say, "Do what I say," or "Obey me," or, apply some punishment.
Or you avoid it.
Yeah. And none of that is aligned with the values that we've been talking about. And so one of the challenges with values is sometimes they can make things more complicated or require more time. And in the case of how we deal with disagreements, if a kid's upset or two kids are upset with each other, if we're going to live our values of healthy communication, of intimacy, of connection, well, that means we have to actually take the time to sit down with the kids. And believe me, if you've ever been in the DeLynn home for more than 3 days, you will have witnessed somebody get upset and us calling a little meeting, whether it's on the floor of our bedroom or the living room, and we're either moderating between two of the kids, or between the parents and the kid, or between one parent and one kid, or another parent is a moderator.
And this would be when they can't clearly reconcile it on their own. That's
Yeah,
clearly the
sometimes,
first choice. But sometimes, especially amidst teen years,
yeah,
they don't
sometimes
always.
I or you will get engaged with the teen, and we start losing our grounding a little bit. And so sometimes the parent who's in a bit of a more stable place, and sometimes even one of the children who's in a bit more of a stable place, will take the leadership role in helping to moderate or mediate a discussion where people can share how they feel, share why they're upset, on both sides, talk about what our values are, talk about the behavior or the situation, and then, apologize if necessary, validate each other, make sure both sides understand why the others were upset, and then hopefully come up with some sort of resolution. And it takes more time. It really does. And a lot of our time is spent talking through hurt feelings or, boundaries or whatever.
Yeah, or even processing tragic things that have happened to our kids, or experiences that have left them feeling unsure. That takes a lot of time and energy to have those sort of one-on-one, or maybe we take the child out for a walk and really try to help them work through and process some of those more challenging and complicated feelings in that way.
Yeah. And the other thing is it's difficult and it's painful, but one of the things we've noticed is that one of the keys to human relationships is emotion regulation. And parents don't talk to their kids about emotion regulation a lot of the time, but more importantly, parents can lose control of their behavior because of their emotions. And so for us, modeling emotion regulation is essential. If I'm upset, if I've been hurt, if I've been offended, if I can pull it together and show them that even though I'm upset, I can choose my behavior while having feelings of being upset. It's the only way to help model and teach emotion regulation to our kids. And we're finding that if a kid goes out in the world without emotion regulation skills, they're going to have a lot of trouble and a lot of self-medicating, a lot of reckless behavior. Unhealthy behavior comes from an inability to regulate emotions, but that begins with us.
It does. And emotional regulation can also look like, I really love you, and I can tell right now that we're really, this is hurting both of us. So I'm going to go ahead. I think we should call it right now for 5 or 10 minutes. No, I love you.
Or an hour or a day.
Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to it. That can be emotional regulation as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, have this external control when you're feeling really overloaded. So that would be another part of modeling emotional health in our family, as well as the discussions that we have with connection versus control.
Yeah.
That takes extra time too, versus just saying you were late for curfew.
Here's your punishment. You're grounded.
Right? Which is a complete disconnect. Usually your child just disconnects and is upset. It's more time, it's more energy to sit with the child and say, let's talk about curfew, shall we? Let's talk about where we're coming from. I'd love to hear what's happening with you when you're late, when you should be coming home, why you don't, what's stopping you from being on time.
And we tell them that our motives are their safety, their health, and their well-being. And sometimes they'll say, well, but sometimes I want to stay after curfew, and we're in a healthy, safe place. And we've even moderated our curfew policy to allow for an extension based on them being in a really healthy, safe situation.
Mm-hmm.
So being
Absolutely.
flexible. Really quickly, David writes, being present in every moment is a value of his. It's so easy to get detached from what's currently right in front of us. Thank you, David, for sharing. Please keep those comments coming from those joining us through Facebook.
Yeah, another value of ours is connection. And I was thinking it might be valuable to take you through the process of, let's say you do the value session with your family, with your spouse, and you have your list, right? Where do you go from there? One thing I thought is just taking you through the basic process. And the first step would be assessment, right? So let's say we're looking at connection, which is one of our values as well. You would just honestly look at your family and say, how are we connecting? And am I happy with the level of connection that we have? And really just sort of assess. And then in those areas maybe that you're less happy with, the weaker areas, that's when you get to be creative and say, are there obstacles in that area that are affecting our ability to connect? And some obstacles could be in the area of connection that you're distracted, right? Maybe you're on your phone a lot when the kids are coming home, or you have a lot of things going on, so you're distracted from. It could also be that maybe your schedule is a little challenging and it's really, really busy. And that's making it so the pace of life is such that it's so fast, it's making it difficult to connect. Maybe it's, could it be your reactivity? Your kids actually are afraid of you or don't feel safe opening up. And so there's this avoidance thing going on in the home. These are all questions to kind of ask. And it's a good place to kind of sort of remedy, like how would I go about embodying this value that I feel like that we have chosen? How could I do that? And what would it look like on a daily basis? For example, one thing, John, do you want to talk about that you do with Winston?
So I was, Margie's got this advantage over me, I think, in her role as, kind of a stay-at-home mom, in the sense that the kids come home from school around 3 or 4, she can give them a little snack or whatever. And then sometimes just in the natural sort of space of that coming home period, the kids will tell her about their day. But then, I'm done with work at 6 o'clock and I come into dinner or whatever, or I see the kids and I'm like, tell me about your day. For some reason, sometimes when they're explicitly asked, how was your day? Like my son, Winston, just told me, I hate it when you ask me how my day is. I'm like, what the crap? I would have thought you'd like it, that I take an interest in you and care about what's going on.
He's often like, talk to mom.
Yeah, he's like, I already told mom. Ask her. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to connect with you, but
so what do you do?
So, Winston's been learning Ultimate Frisbee and he really likes Ultimate Frisbee. And so he likes to play Frisbee. So instead of like trying to corner him at dinner or, ask him in a way that he hated, I just would say, hey, bud, let's go throw the Frisbee. And, whenever we can, we go out to the field kind of by our house and we play Frisbee golf or we throw the Frisbee. And lo and behold, just through the natural course of kind of being together doing something else, Winston sometimes will open up and talk about stuff. And that's really kind of special. So it's a way, and I think you're kind of talking about assessment. Don't be scared if the method that you're using to pursue your value isn't quite working. Be open to other ways to pursue the value by doing an assessment. This isn't working. Let me try something else. Because it isn't that Winston didn't want to connect. It's that for him, connection happens when he's feeling a certain way, and it's not when he's cornered by his super tall dad trying to force him to give an immediate response about his day.
And I actually remember reading in a Psychology Today article, even with partners or spouses, that when you go out to eat, to not always sit across from one another, that people actually just psychologically have a difficult time sometimes with that direct pressure of communication. And I've found that a lot of people will talk about how their teens open up in the car, and because they're side by side, they're not necessarily. So yeah, I think you're totally right. That method totally matters, and to kind of rethink things if you feel like there's an obstacle kind of in the way or something's not working.
Excellent. So I guess we had as one more point to talk about a recent situation we had with Winston, where actually our daughter was home from college and she's like, you guys are always reminding your younger kids what to do. You're always telling them, wake up, get dressed, brush your teeth. Yeah. And it's been true with maybe all of our kids at one point or another, where, Margie, I support, and Margie really loves rituals. She loves bedtime ritual, morning ritual. She loves to make sure all the important things get done before and after school. And yeah, it put us to the point where our daughter sort of alerted to us that we were just reminding our kids all day long, and they weren't learning maturity in terms of self-motivation, self-governing, etc. So we decided, in this case, not to pick on Winston, but we decided to sit down with him and to talk to him about our values, and how one of our values is that we're not always having to tell him what to do all the time, and checking up on him and nagging him.
Did he notice we were nagging him all the time and saying those things? Yeah.
Yeah. And he was super connected. He's like, yeah, I hate it when you guys do that. It almost demotivates me. And so what Margie had him do, she sat down with him and she had him make a list of the things he's supposed to do every morning and the list of things he's supposed to do every night. And we sort of put a timeline together of what needs to be done by what time. And we just sort of said, we're not going to nag you anymore. We're not going to remind you. We're not going to bug you. But there's certain parts of that ritual that he really enjoys, like getting a little nighttime tea or a little back scratch from Margie, or he likes his screen time, with either, his Sony PlayStation or his cell phone. And we've sort of tied some of those privileges to his ability to complete the list and to be self-driven. And it's really fun to see Winston waking himself up and checking his list, and it makes him feel better about himself. So,
and not only that, but he added to the list. So we started with the basics where we were make your bed and do these things. And we were chronically stressed because he would be late. So a lot of it was just to be on time. But then all of a sudden he adds, I kind of want to make my own breakfast every morning.
Yeah, and so now every morning, instead of us making Winston breakfast, he's up there making himself breakfast. He's waking up extra early. So that's the crazy thing. What we were doing was building resentment and demotivating him, and it wasn't effective, and it was frustrating all of us. But by sitting down with him, getting in touch with values, and then sharing emotional intimacy and connecting with him, he ended up not only doing the things he needed to do, but adding to them in a really beautiful way. And so far, so good.
Yeah, and I would just say the key to that is being consistent and being willing to honestly have the natural consequences spelled out. And if it isn't met, or if things go awry, then you honestly have to, that's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
Where you have to say, oh, I'm sorry. Do you remember last night? And it didn't quite work out, but let's try again. And you're doing really great on this one. And, so anyway.
Love it. All right. So before we get to ritual, which is our next thing, Patricia writes, knowing that each of our children are different and how we approach them and teach them will be different. So she's basically just saying not all of our kids are going to respond to the same approach in the same way. And knowing that kids are different and sometimes
isn't that the truth?
Require different responses is a really key thing to consider.
I know sometimes you get that, rhythm and structure, and not only that, but something that works for a child at a certain time, all of a sudden you realize it's not working anymore. So parenting, it just really keeps you on your toes.
Mike writes, 70% of communication is body language. So learn effective body language. Speak your truth through your body language. I love that. Rachel says we need to write a book. I agree. Can we write a book, please? Will you write a book with me?
Yes, I'll write a book.
Margie's going to write a book with me. You heard it first. You guys hold her to that and hold me to that.
All right.
All right. Let's see. All right, Margie. So now it is time to talk about ritual.
Oh, I love ritual.
And if those of you are still tuned in, there's 56 of you tuned in. Please start writing in the Facebook comments some of your family rituals, because we will share them with the listening audience. And we know that many of you have way better or way cool rituals that are just as good or better than ours. But Margie does an amazing, masterful job at ritual. So I'm going to shut up and let you tell us about the rituals you've shared in our family.
Thank you, babe. Here's the thing about ritual. You know how we were talking about embodiment and kind of reviewing some of those values, and the first step was just
values and then embodiment
and then
Ritual.
ritual.
So think
This
of
is such a
bottom to top.
great place to start if you pick a value that you can't really see, right? And so you're looking through and you've taken care of sort of your part of saying, what would it look like if I embodied this value? But what if in your family life, you don't really have spaces for it to live and breathe, that value? Ritual is a perfect place to begin, to have it sort of, this is where your values show up in your daily life. It's where your children will feel it in your schedule. They'll feel it from your embodiment, they'll feel it from your person, but this is where you actually create space to say, this is important and it will happen. So I love them. I think they're grounding. I find them really connecting and they're really fulfilling. Really simple things go a really long way. So what are some examples of rituals from our home?
Do you want to start?
Sure. One thing that I would say is just we treat morning and evening as special times. So when our children wake up, they'll get a good morning. We normally make a meal for them before they go to school. And then we also end their days with usually reading time. And I normally make tea, and I usually end sort of as they're going to sleep with a massage, or I'll tickle their back or do something soothing and connecting with them. But morning and evening, we slow down time and we show up to connect with them.
And I love that Margie has this amazing ritual where she goes to the library every week and buys cool books for the kids to read. So every night before they go to bed, they can just run to the book bag and grab a book that either they requested or that Margie thought they'd like, and they always have something to read. For those of you who want your kids to become readers, that is a masterful ritual that Margie implemented. And our kids were all readers growing up, which is something I wasn't. So I'm really thrilled that you implemented that ritual.
Thanks, honey. Other ideas. So we could start with daily. You can also do weekly rituals, but some other daily ones would be dinner together. We try to do that most evenings where we sit down.
Definitely 5 or 6 times a week. We have a family dinner.
I try to make a fresh, relatively healthy, very tasty meal. And we do gratitude now. We share gratitude in lieu of a prayer, because that kind of makes everyone feel great.
Another ritual, when we stopped going to church during different phases of our journey, we were really conditioned to think that you had to have structure on Sunday or you couldn't have thoughtful, spiritual, moral kids. We've relaxed on that a little bit, but we have several Sunday rituals that have been really rewarding for us. So we wake up in the morning and we usually try and make some type of big breakfast, eggs, bacon, hash browns, waffles, pancakes, whatever it is. And for me, one of the most magical parenting times of our entire married life. And by the way, you can do rituals if you're single. You can do rituals if you're a couple without kids. This is, we talk about kids because we have them, but this applies to everyone. But one of the most sacred times for me is that moment Sunday morning. The kids have kind of rolled out of bed. We've eaten this big breakfast, and then we're just sitting around the living room and conversation just erupts, whether it's someone's date the night before or something that they've been thinking about or something they read. And sometimes the 4 or 5 or 6 of us will just get into this really thoughtful, loving, intense, passionate, intimate conversation that only happens once you've got this ritual that provides the structure and the soil for the intimacy to grow.
So good.
And so that combination of, morning breakfast, space for conversation. Margie just loves Sunday hikes. So sometimes we pretty much always on a Sunday, we'll pick a trail and go hiking. Those are just amazing times for intimacy. And it all happens because of the structure of the ritual.
Yeah, we did do a redefine our Sabbath kind of thing to look at the values of a Sunday with new eyes that reflected our family, I think, at the time. So at different times we've done Super Soul Sunday.
What is that?
Which is like an Oprah program that still is quite, what would you say, spiritual in nature. She brings on a guest of sorts, but we have stopped doing that. And I think the culture in our family has shifted a little bit, and the kids really love a news time show.
So we'll watch 60 Minutes as a family on Sunday morning or early afternoon. 60 Minutes has a good variety. Like, last week, I'm thinking it was like a lawyer from the Nuremberg trials, but then they had a segment on like the Boston Red Sox, and it gives personal interest stories and news items that have broad appeal. And us sitting down to watch 60 Minutes as a family and then talk about what we saw, that has been provided some really powerful moments. And it's just, it's like, it's Sunday at news time, and we'll go down and watch some news.
And having said that, sometimes they don't want to do it. And so we don't, or they want a shorter version. So we'll say, how about a TED Talk? Do you guys you guys can pick it, any topic you want. I think it's important to be flexible and to allow, we don't like forcing our kids to do things they don't want to do. So having a lot of options. What are some other things we do?
Some of the listeners have added, we'll just mention a few and then you can mention some others as well. Alicia writes, I'm always excited to see my kids. I make sure they know it. Hugs after school, meet them at the door after work or being with friends. I always find a way to show them that I'm happy to see them. Thank you, Alicia.
I bet they feel that too, Alicia.
Jacob writes, communication with my kids is so essential at dinner. We always talk about the day with them. No matter what happened the day, no one is in trouble. We have to keep that communication open so we know where they are at life. It is amazing what we talk about and how they feel safe telling us what is going on in their lives. And it sounds, Jacob, like you're modeling this idea of connection and intimacy, where even if the kid tells you, I skipped school or I punched a kid in the face, instead of destroying the family experience by getting mad and punishing them, you're basically saying getting in trouble's off limits.
Not to say, Jacob, that your children are saying that at the dinner meal.
But you're basically saying connection over control and manipulation. Alicia writes, we also have a dance party.
Dance parties are the best.
While we do chores together, makes it fun and enforces my favorite value.
I love that.
Cleanliness.
Great.
And then Patricia writes, we talk about our day at dinner also. However, for every one negative thing, we also have them tell us 2 positive things if they want. Hugs, kisses, and I love yous always before they leave the house when they come home. And I love that, of like just going around the table. Maybe you don't have a prayer anymore, but what's wrong with going around the table and saying a few things you're grateful for and a few things that went wrong? That's really positive. So thank you, Patricia and Alicia and Jacob and others for sharing some of your rituals. Were there others you wanted to add?
The only other thing I'd say is so as a couple, you can have rituals. One thing that John and I do regularly is we try to walk together, we run together, and we've recently started doing CrossFit together. And those are always, they're just times where you kind of reach for one another in your days. And I just think it's a beautiful thing. And I always feel better on those days that we do that. So, and then recently, Clara and I have been attacking parenthood together. Okay, so there's a TV show that if you haven't seen it, it is probably the best TV show Margi and I have ever experienced. And all throughout our 3-4 years of marriage, depending on how you count, we've always watched TV shows, and Parenthood by far is the best. And it's great to watch with teens, like older, kind of 14 to 18. I find it brings out, and it reflects our values. We kind of look at it and think, we really appreciate the values it portrays there and the way it portrays family, not being perfect, but working through difficulty, being there for one another. And it really doesn't dance around difficult topics. And our teens love it. Yeah. So if you've not checked out the Parenthood TV show, check it out. It's outstanding. Yeah. So just a final thing around rituals, be creative, allow it.
Julie writes, "This Is Us."
Oh yeah,
That's
we're
a
watching that
great
too.
show too. We love This Is Us. So thanks
Yeah,
for the tip, Julie.
we're on the same page.
This Is Us is also a fantastic show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, be creative, start small, and stay simple. There's no need to like be the overachiever here. A little goes a long way. So, and don't forget the daily versus the weekly. You can have weekly rituals and daily.
All right.
Moving on.
The next topic. So we've got, let's see if I get this right. Values.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, embodiment,
Yeah.
living, practicing what you preach, walking the talk. And then on top of that, you've got rituals. This is the Margi pyramid,
which is sort of
the Margi family pyramid.
Yeah, it's the structure with which your values rituals get to enter your life.
Are the sort of like daily or weekly
time
structure that acts as the vessel to deliver.
Look at you.
The behavior that's based on the values.
Yeah.
Margi's next sort of level is tradition, which is a little bit like values or a little bit like ritual, but it's actually a little bit different because it's sort of seasonal and it's slightly different than ritual maybe in different ways. So Margi, talk about why you think tradition is an important level in your pyramid of family connection.
Well, here's the deal. Here's why I differentiate. Tradition can happen a little less frequently, right, than rituals. But I don't know, when I look back in my life, I don't know if you all are the same way. There's sort of an emotional impact around traditions. So that would be like holidays, like birthdays, like there's emotional impact there that makes it memorable. So I just wanted to harness that a little bit. They may happen less frequently, but the emotional impact oftentimes is considerable. So these can be anything from birthdays, holidays, vacations, celebrating the first day of school. I think it's important to note you can create your own tradition, your own holiday. It could be the last day of school. It can be a coming of age, some sort of age you want to celebrate with your children. It can be around seasons, the first day of fall, winter solstice. So you can actually create your own as well. So an example from our home that I chose just to focus on our birthdays. So when our children were little, I started to reflect on how I wanted to celebrate their birth, their entrance into the world, and what I felt like would be important. So taking our values into consideration, it would be like connection and, having them feel really, really loved and safe. And sometimes those things get lost in parties. Sometimes they're there, but not always. And sometimes with gifts, they're not there. They can be, but they're not always. And so I wanted to create these traditions that would make sure that our children felt celebrated. And so a couple of things that I thought I would share. We started doing a tradition of writing our kids a letter. So John and I alternate, and once a year on their birthday, I'll show you, this is Clara's book. So they get a book, but you don't have to have a book. You can start anytime. You can start when they're 5, 6. So we alternate writing a letter around their birthday and sharing what kind of person they are, how the year's been, their achievements, things that have been hard, joys that we share with them. And so here is Winston's. This is what Winston's looks like as well. And so each of our children have these letters, and we read them out loud after we have their dinner.
Birthday dinner.
Yeah, so they choose their meals for the day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And after the dinner, cake and ice cream, we get them all nice and sweetened up and satisfied. They can open their gifts. Whoever wrote the letter that year reads the letter. And it's this place to just sort of bask in them and celebrate them. And, a lot of it may feel redundant to them because it's that year, but I'll tell you, they go back just, Anna and Maya will go back when they're 5 and read their 5th. And you know what? You don't remember. You don't remember what your favorite songs were, what you were like, and they've really, really
things
enjoyed.
That were hard that year for you, things that, your accomplishments, what these birthday letter journals end up being is sort of a chronicle of the highlights and lowlights and areas of growth of their 18 years at home, basically.
Yeah, and one thing that I was reflecting on as I was writing, thinking about Clara's letter this year was, you know, I lost my dad in November, and there's this piece where you miss them, you miss their voice, you miss how they loved you, or how they, especially with a parent that, you know, you really felt connected to. And one thing I thought about with these letters, and I've told the kids this, is when we're gone, you can still hear me because I'm right here, and you can know the things I loved about you, and you can get this sense of my love through these letters each year that you lived. And so that's something that came to me recently. Another thing we do with birthdays is we do a trivia game around the table. So this is an example of like Clara's this year. Note, like, not super fancy. It's like done on white paper, colored by a child, where we ask things about, oh, I'm not doing it right. The kid, the child, the birthday child.
So I'll read an example.
Yeah.
So this one says, what is Clara's favorite childhood soundtrack? Celine Dion's Miracle CD, Raffi, Innocence Mission, or Nicolette Larson? And we'll have different trivia questions, and each person at the table will have to read, and then everyone will give their best guess. And we try and pick things that not everyone knows or that aren't always obvious.
Yeah.
And the purpose? Yeah,
is to get to know the child and have the child, and it's fun. I mean, who is Clara's favorite parenthood character? You know, I mean, it's just kind of a fun way.
Is it Sarah, Julia, Amber, or Max? For those of you who watch Parenthood, I want to hear what your favorite
can see if you're right
parenthood character is.
Anyway, so those are some things we do. Another thing that we do is we have photos of the child on the table around when we're eating the dinner. It's decorated with them from all ages. And we also open scrapbooks. So you know how if you organize, I did that for a bit. I haven't done that for a while, but we take those out and open them up, and they can go through those for the day. We watch videos of them when they were younger, oftentimes after the meal. It really is just this way to connect with the fact that they are loved, they are treasured, that we look at their life and we marvel at them. Right? That's birthdays.
And that happens every single birthday, every single year. And it's a lot of work. Margie puts a lot of work and love into it, but I know the kids really treasure it. There are a few more rituals or traditions that people are sharing. Kimberly writes, for years we would bond over making Irish stew, and we would include a Guinness stout beer at the very end of putting all the ingredients into the pot. Oh. Pouring the beer in took an interesting ritualistic aspect, and I would always save a swig at the very end. Shame on you, Kimberly. Just kidding. After drinking the last drink, no shame. We're anti-shame. After drinking the last drink, I'd say to the kids, all things in moderation. That's actually the opposite of shame. That's really powerful. Mm-hmm. I think they would get the subtle hint that it's okay to live an ethical life rather than a rule-bound life. Wow, Kimberly.
Beautiful.
The hair on my arm is standing up. That was really beautiful. And then Patricia writes, we have family game nights and spouse date night. Yeah. Those are great rituals. Those are a few weekly things. Daily, we have dinner together every night, except sometimes if my husband and I eat out on a date. Then there are holidays with family traditions that have been handed down with each generation. Love the sharing, Kimberly and Patricia and everyone else. Jennifer says, Margie, I wish I was your neighbor. I would want to hang out with you every day.
Oh, me too.
Anne says, I do the trivia thing too, but the letters are so great. Remembering the love and treasures year after year. So I love it. Lolly says Crosby or Adam are her favorite parenthood characters. Or Adam. Good choice, Lolly. Julie says she picks Max.
Yeah.
No. She says, I bet she picked Max. But Julie loves Julia.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right.
They're also lovable.
So we have a few parenthood fans. And Lolly writes Sunday night movie night. What a great tradition.
Yeah. and we do that
popcorn
sometimes too.
and juice
Yeah,
and
sometimes we
movie
forgo the
night.
news and we're like, let's just watch something fun. Little
Yeah.
popcorn, treats. Love that.
Our own Amy Grubbs. I'm excited to have a comment from Amy. She writes, years ago, we created a Kids Day. Our daughter asked us why there was a Mother's Day and a Father's Day and why we didn't have a day celebrating children.
That.
We've done that. We did that in Seattle. We had a Kids Day. So we decided years ago to add a Kids Day that falls in between Mother's and Father's Day.
Smart.
So kind of late May, I'm guessing.
I love that you schedule it too.
Yeah, that's probably crucial.
Yeah, because otherwise
tying it to the calendar. So they have a Kids Day between Mother's Day and Father's Day, and we let our daughter choose however she wants to spend this day, and we celebrate being a kid.
Really brilliant.
Yeah, they get the whole day, right?
They get
breakfast, lunch, dinner, like activities,
that's an example
fun.
Of creating a tradition for yourself
that
matches your.
Yeah,
I love that too.
And they spend the day celebrating their kid. She is now 16. Shout out to Michaela, but now she still loves it, and we all look forward to it.
I love it.
I love it.
And again, no need to make it complicated. So the birthday one is a little involved, I'll say. But I do love this too with Christmas time. You know, a lot of times things get like very stressful very quickly, where you end up you're doing more and more and more. And I love the values conversation as a place to start. Like, what do we value? And then you build traditions around those holidays that actually reflect that, versus racing through and having like our culture sort of determine what your Christmas feels like. So there you go. I empower you to create traditions that reflect you and make you really happy.
That's nice of you to empower them.
I know. You don't need that, but it was encouraging, right?
I'll take some Margi empowerment.
So anyway, okay, we're on the final block, y'all. So thanks for hanging in there.
Block number 5.
That's right. And it's actually one of my favorite blocks.
Yeah. And you can see a little bit of it right above us here. So tell us.
From years ago, though.
Tell us about.
It has the Mormon vibe still. So it's downstairs. I wouldn't say that's totally, but that was Seattle.
All right.
That was a Seattle.
Those listening have no idea what we're talking about. So tell us what
So the final block in building a family culture would be your home environment. Makes sense, right? But the way I would say it is like, what's your home vibe? What's the vibe of your home? And the idea behind this is sort of, how can your home reflect what you value? How can you get those values like to be felt when people are in your home? And so you can consider ways to convey your values in your home environment. And so we'll give you a couple examples of values that we have, and then how our home would reflect the values, just to give you, again, something practical. And
so in all our main rooms of our house, we have a value of learning and of education and of reading, frankly. And in all of the main rooms of our house, so the home teacher room, I don't know what to call it. We've got it when you walk right in the door,
like a small
turn
room.
right, there's a home teacher room. And then in the main living room, and then in each of the kids' bedrooms, there's a bookshelf. And on those bookshelves, we don't try and have every book, but we try and include books that represent important historical figures or important themes or concepts. So my Chaim Potok books, My Name is Asher Lev, or Davita's Harp, or The Chosen, or The Promise are there.
Frankly, like our favorite books.
Yeah, the biographies of Winston Churchill, or of Franklin D. Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, or Harry Truman, or
I have more fiction.
Harry Potter, or some of your classic favorites. What are some of yours? I
kind of run the gamut with things, but I have like Steinbeck, or I have Edith Wharton, or I have, who else do I love? Wallace Stegner, but we're in there.
And these bookshelves, really, we don't read those books anymore, but they represent and reflect our values of learning and of heroes and of character and of virtues.
And our children have them too.
Yeah. Yep.
They have their own. So I've kept the kids' books that they most love. They've gone through them and saved, because I'm a bit of a minimalist. Like, I love everything to sort of have value if possible in our home. And so they've gone through and picked their favorites, and then they have theirs from their teen years growing up. they keep kind of their favorites, the ones that they feel like were really formative or special to them.
And the point here is that the physical surroundings of your home be designed in a way that they reflect and reinforce your values. And
You
so
want them to read, so you have books.
So having our favorite books kept in visible places in the bookshelves of our main rooms of our home is one way that our whole family is continually reminded of that value of learning and of character and of integrity.
Mm-hmm. Another thing we do is that we have subscriptions to magazines that sort of reflect our children's interests. So for Claire and Winston, for example, right now, they're really into this magazine called Muse, which is like a science magazine, and they really love that. It's been different at different times. So that's another thing. It comes in the mail. It kind of feels like a present, feels exciting. So sometimes we give those as stocking stuffers, a magazine subscription that's kind of, what else do we do?
We sometimes watch documentaries together as a family. We listen to podcasts. Sometimes when we're traveling, we'll put a podcast on.
Or when I'm cooking.
Or when she's cooking, yeah, and we'll listen to it. We try and listen to classical music. I already mentioned our news time on Sunday mornings, but we take every chance we can to talk about what we've read or talk about what we've learned.
We like to share.
And it reinforces that value of learning.
Oh, the other thing is I have a magazine subscription to Psychology Today, which is totally nerdy.
It's great. It's a great magazine.
It's totally nerdy, but
she knows more about psychology than I do, by the way.
I really, really love it. So I'll for dinner discuss an article, or we'll kind of debate sort of an idea to something, and it's super fun. So, but you can use whatever your interest is, Anyway, so another example of having a value be reflected in your home environment. Let's say the value was sharing vulnerability. So the kind of deeper layer underneath that is safety, right? You want your children to sort of feel safe in the environment. So to me, that manifests in soft blankets, candles, warm drinks on hand, good food, nice music in the background, bird feeder outside the window, like calming. And then the fact that each child, we've worked hard, we're not super fancy people, but each child has a room that reflects them, that they can sort of retreat to and feel safe and feel similar comforts in their own rooms. And I was just going to say, clearly the emotional climate of the home of safety you would want to look at as well to match the physical. But that's an example of looking at vulnerability and feeling like, what is a safe, peaceful, calm environment? If we want people to share and feel safe to do so, what would that look like, feel like, smell like? So that is another way to do that.
And then the final example of how Margi's tried to have our surroundings reflect our values is there's probably 5 or 6 places in our home where Margi's put up little signs. And so those of you watching right now, you can see a little sign that's right above our heads. And it's a sort of a Buddhist inspired quote that says, "Nothing is worth more than this day." And that's sort of the Buddhist philosophy that if you focus on the past, you can't change it. If you focus on the future, you may not get it. So what's most important is now. And so we have a sign reflecting that. There's another Gandhi quote that says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." That's a reminder to our whole family that we need to live into the thing, not just complain about the thing. Mary Oliver, there's a quote in my office that says something to the effect of, "Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with this one wild and precious life or ride?" I don't forget.
Life.
Yeah. And it's just about making the most of every moment and seizing the day, carpe diem sort of stuff.
Right. And above where we eat, we have a quote by George Eliot that says, "What is it that we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other?" So that's another very physical way that you can think about putting your values literally on the walls and have them reflected there and be reminded of them. So just some ideas.
I love it. Really quickly, to check in with our listeners, Shirley writes, at Christmas, we hang out kids' baby shoes on the tree. When they grow up and leave home, they get one shoe of the pair as a symbol of our continuing
Oh,
connection and the joy we experience because they are our children.
oh, nice.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Shannon writes, I think adopting or buying a dog or a cat is a great way to teach a child responsibility. I love that.
It can also really add to just sort of a really nice, cozy family vibe.
Yeah,
People really love
definitely.
their pets.
Some pets, not all pets.
Not all pets, but some.
Patricia writes, we have tons of books as well and a diverse collection. We have had to replace well-loved books many times. Music and movies and shows are all great.
Yeah.
Gosh, this has been a great discussion. Wow, that's so nice. Thank you, Patricia. Let's see. Yeah. Michelle writes, this is just a lovely discussion. I've been laughing, I've gotten tearful, and I'm feeling inspired. Thank you. So thank you, Michelle. We're glad you like it. All right.
Well, so that's kind of what we have today, is just sort of, if it interested you at all, this idea of creating a family culture, then we do have this idea of like a weekly challenge where we leave you with like something to sort of focus you or challenge you in the next week. And if you like to, and if that feels good to you, one thing I would challenge you to do is sit down and have that values discussion and see what your partner and you can come up with, or what your kids and you come up with, and then begin from there to do the embodiment, and then the rituals and traditions, and lastly, your home environment, how all those can build to this hopefully magnificent space that you all create together.
And I'm sure most of you or all of you are already doing a lot of this, so it's just fun to kind of share in that with you. Hasn't it been great to get listeners share their rituals?
I love it. Thanks so much for participating.
Yeah. And those of you who are listening asynchronously, just to the podcast, go up to Mormon Stories and share your rituals or your traditions on the comments page of mormonstories.org. Or if you're on YouTube and you're watching this on YouTube after we posted it, go share it there. What's wrong with filling up YouTube and blog comments instead of with vitriol and negativity, filling it with positivity and with ideas?
And we really do benefit from hearing one another, from sharing ideas. So we really appreciate it.
So Margi, thank you for planning today's episode. I think it was lovely.
Well, thanks. A humble offering. So hopefully, you found one or two things that, resonated, or so.